Hey, what's up? Welcome back to another live stream here on Free Will Photos. And today, every portrait photographer needs to know about this software if you want to get professional looks in a single click. And I'm going to be showcasing how you can use this software using On1 Photo Raw and at least incorporating it into the On1 Photo Raw workflow. Now, that software is Retouch for me. And for the audience of the Free Will Photos channel, we have a coupon code, which is FWP20. This will save you some money when you check out. So let's go ahead and jump into the computer and take a look at this actual software at a glance really quickly here. So we'll jump over here to the screen and we're on the website. You can see the link down in the description box is an affiliate link. It'll take you to this site so you can actually take a look at these programs for yourself or these plugins. And they work really well with Photoshop. And I'm going to show you how they're going to work with On1 Photo Raw today. So the first set of plugins, which these are the ones we're going to look at heavily in today's live stream, because I think that this is where most people who are portrait photographers and you want to get that professional look, this is where you're going to want to start. All right. We're going to look at the hill, the dodge and burn, and the portrait volumes as well to help define essentially what's going on with the subject in the frame. And then on a later tutorial, we'll take a look at face make. Now, I'm not one of those people that uses digital makeup a whole lot. I have made some videos on that before, so we're not going to focus on that today. This will be a dedicated video, so that way those who are really interested in adding in digital makeup, you'll have an opportunity to take a look at that. And then we'll also look at skin tone and mattifier. We're not going to look at skin mask. Maybe that'll be at a later date, but either way, we're going to take a look at these two plugins, if you will, or tools using their cloud system, which we'll talk about as well. And then we're not going to look at crop, but we'll also look at eye bundle and then maybe the teeth whitening if we have time for that. I think teeth whitening is pretty straightforward. I'm not quite sure many of us need an AI plugin to whiten teeth at this point. We can usually figure out how to do that with a brush. And if not, then that's okay. So let me go ahead and close this down. So we'll just minimize that because we don't need it anymore. And you can see I have On1 Photo Raw pulled up with tons of portrait images. And this is purely for those who are portrait photographers and you're looking to get that professional look. And I use this with my headshots, which that's what I get paid for as a professional when I'm hired to execute headshots. But you can also use this for your family portraits. If you're photographing your kids, maybe you're on a vacation and you want to, for all those husbands out there, and you want to get a really nice retouch on your wife when you're photographing her, this is the tool that you want to consider using. All right. You don't have to be a professional to use it. I think that it is geared towards professionals, but it's definitely geared towards the professional look. All right. And that's what we're really going to hone in on today. So you can get your own images and follow along, but I kind of want to start with the overall process. All right. I think that there's 3 ways that you can incorporate Retouch for me inside of an On1 workflow. Unfortunately, even though this is a Photoshop plugin and it works really well with Photoshop, you can't activate it as a layer inside of On1. So if I were to open up this image here, we'll just go with our cover image. All right. Now, this is a model by the name Nikki. I met her at the Build Expo and we went on a photo walk, and I have lots and lots of photos of her, mostly in this dress right here. But nonetheless, what you will notice when I open this up and we get On1 to finish rendering it, I'll show you what I mean by you can't activate this as a plugin inside of On1. All right. So But with that being said, whenever you're working in a raw workflow, because this is a raw image, you want to do all of your raw edits first. And you can see on this image, I've already added Brilliance AI into the photo. So that way I'm getting the best out of using a raw image. All right. I can't stress that enough. In the 3 workflows that I'm going to cover today, you want to make sure that you do all of your raw editing inside of On1 Photo Raw first before you start to do anything else. Now, the challenge, typically when you have a plugin installed, you can come up here to Layer, and then you can come down to Filters, and then you can come over to the software that you have in. So let's say in this one, I wanted to activate the healing tool. All right. If I click on Retouch for Me Heal, On1 is going to try to open the software, and then you'll see that it just doesn't actually go all the way through. All right. And this isn't a problem with Retouch for Me, nor On1. It's just how the software is being read by On1, I guess you could say. And you get this issue right here. All right. So if you get this, you could think like, oh, well, I'm just out of luck. I can't use this plugin with On1 Photo Raw. That's not true. All right. Because this plugin works as a standalone. Now, here's the caveat to this plugin working as a standalone. It has to be a TIFF or a JPEG file that you're uploading into the software. You cannot use Retouch for Me on a raw image for the standalone programs. And we'll go over that a little bit later, but I just wanted to touch on that. So in the workflow, the 3 workflows, let me just go over those really quickly. I have my notes right here. So the first one I'm calling the non-destructive style method. And essentially what this means is you're going to edit your raw photo. That's step 1 in all of these, by the way. So I'm not going to repeat that anymore. Step 2 in this particular workflow is you export to a TIFF or a JPEG, and then you open it into the Retouch for Me software of your choosing if you're going to go standalone, and then you export it from there, reopen back inside of On1. The next one is finishing touches method. All right. So this one, you're going to edit your file inside of On1. You're going to stylize your image inside of On1, meaning you're going to put a preset from over here on the left side, and then you'll export it with all of your presets included, and then you'll run the Retouch for Me software to get the skin softening that you're looking for. That's the second method. The third one is probably my favorite method because it gives you the most flexibility, and this is the layering method. And we'll talk about how this method works, but essentially you can still use the layers section over here after you have processed all of your images. So you export them from On1 Photo Raw, you run it into whichever method of processing your image through Retouch for Me. And there are a few different methods. We're going to cover 3 of them today. Once you're done with that, you can bring that back in as a layer, and I'm going to demonstrate that. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Now, I kind of set this live stream up as like a cooking show where I walk you through some things, but then I've already baked the pie. So that way we don't have to wait for the pie to bake, just to help expedite the process that we're going through. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit the X here because I've already edited my image. All right. So we're going to go through workflow number 1, which is the non-destructive style method. So I want to make sure that I'm not destroying my in style. Notice over here in the effects, the only thing that I've applied here is just a curves correction, and that's for the tone. All right. This isn't really a style. I haven't added any color grade or anything that would transform the image into a finished piece of work. All I've done was this curve. You'll notice her skin was really bright and it was also really yellow. So all I did with this curve was reintroduce some of the red in her skin, because in the original, you can see her skin is naturally red, but because of the camera profile that I used with my raw processor, I needed to reintroduce some of the red into her skin and then also dial back some of that brightness so her skin looks more natural to the style that I want to go for ultimately. All right, that's all that I've done here. Make sure that it looks like she has a nice tan, essentially. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and hit the X here, and that's just gonna leave the image alone. The other one was just dynamic contrast. It's not really a style, and I put that on the background just to make the background stand out. Not a big deal. All right, but you could essentially on your own images have absolutely nothing over here in the effects module. Now, because like I said, this is like a cooking show and I kind of already worked through this, the first way that we're going to look at editing the image is inside of one of the programs. It's called ARMS. All right. Now this is free to download, but you do have to make sure you have the plugins installed on your computer. So for me, I have 4 of them installed on my computer. That's going to be the Dodge and Burn, the Face Make, which again, we're not going to cover today, Retouch for Me Heal, and then Retouch for Me Portrait Volumes. So I'm going to go ahead and activate ARMS or ARAMS, however you want to say that. And while that opens, let me get some coffee. And you can see I have a project already created here. Now, the way that this works is, think of this as a workspace, all right? You have now, and you'll see a few different options here, but in the workflow that I'm recommending right now, the non-destructive workflow, we've edited our raw image and then we exported that as a TIFF, all right? That's what we're simulating right now. So what you would do is you would come in here, you would click create project, you would do all the naming, and then you get to choose where you want that project to be saved. I'm using the hard drive where the original images are located to save all of my work. But once you have that, you can just hit start project. I think that that's pretty straightforward. If you run into issues with that, you can definitely leave a comment, let me know what your questions are. But where it gets fun is inside of the actual project. So once you get in there, you'll add your photos, and this layout and design is extremely easy to use. All you have to do is click add photos, navigate to where your photos are. And what's cool about the ARAMS processor or workspace is that it allows you to work on the raw image. Now, I don't recommend this, all right? And that's why I was saying you want to start inside of On1, get your raw edits, because as soon as you're done inside of the ARAMS workspace, it's going to export it as a JPEG or a TIFF based off of what you select. You don't get to export as a DNG, all right? Now, that's for everyone who wants to work in that raw workspace. Now, if you shot a bunch of JPEGs, then okay, not a problem. And what I'll also mention is if you shot an image with high ISO and you have a lot of noise, you definitely want to run that through No Noise AI before you send it out into editing over here inside of the ARMS web or workspace. All right. So here is our image that, let me just double click it. This is our image that came straight out of the raw workspace. This is my TIFF file that I exported. Like I said, it's like a cooking show. And essentially this represents that raw image that I already processed and took care of. And now I'm ready to run through the ARMS browser. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. On the left side, you have a few options here to organize your images, and I don't use this as much because I usually have a small batch of images that I'm working on, so I don't really need to organize them in any way, shape, or form. I just need to be able to get to the image that I want to run through the ARMS processor and then go with it. And then across the top, you have the name of your files if you're looking at a full screen version of an image, as well as you have reject and favorite if you're doing culling. And then along the top here, you have some other icons. Now, Apex, we're going to take a look at a little bit later in the live stream, but Apex is another workspace. That one does not allow you to use raw images. So you have to use a TIFF or a JPEG, whereas this one will allow me to process a raw image. The ARAMs will allow me to process a raw image. Apex won't, and Apex works strictly in the cloud. That's the separation between the two. But don't worry, we're going to cover that when we get there. Then you see that I have some credits here. All right. You can purchase credits, so that way you can pay as you go for all of the edits, but the credits are only being used in the cloud. If you purchase a plugin and you download it to your computer, you can run unlimited retouches through there, never being charged a dime extra than what you've already paid for the software. All right. So if you buy the software, you download it to your computer, you keep it forever, and you run as many images through it as you want, and you don't have to worry about paying for it. The caveat is you have to buy each of these plugins individually. There is no bundle deal. All right. So if you want Hill, you buy just Hill, and they all cost the same amount. So you'll see that over on the website. But again, there's that coupon code, so you can save some money. And it's also a great way of supporting this channel at the same time. Then you have over here to update your credits if you purchased any, and then obviously to buy them. And then we have settings. Now, I'm not going to open settings, but when you set up this software, we'll go through that in a deeper overview or a more dedicated video. But if you purchase these plugins and you download them to your computer, you definitely want to make sure that you open up settings and you activate each of them. That is a requirement. Otherwise, you're not going to have them over here. All right. And then you have notifications if there's anything that's being shared. I'm not going to cover details and export. I think that those are pretty straightforward. You click on details, you're going to get details about the image, metadata, all that good stuff. Nothing overly impressive there. But with export, you have a few options here. So starting off with applying presets, if I hit this drop down, you can see I have a preset Hill and Burn 1, and that's just something that I created. But you can create more presets, and you can just use those as an option. All right. I'm not going to worry about this because we're going to manually go through it. Now, when I last used this software, I was computing in the cloud, and this is one of those programs. Let me see if I get the item doesn't come up there. I'll show you a screenshot of what pops up when you start computing in the cloud, because I think for many photographers who are concerned about working with their images in the cloud, that the company is going to take those photos and do something with them that you may not want to have done with them. I think it's this one right here. Well, you get this pop up right here, and all it says, let me zoom in on it for you. So you get a pop up whenever you start processing your image in the cloud, and it says Cloud Retouch will send your photo to our server for retouching upon your request. We don't store or use your photo for any other purpose, ensuring your data is safe and your privacy is respected. Your data remains personally yours. For more details, check the end user agreement. Now, I do recommend everyone looks through the end user agreement. I did browse through it, and I didn't see anything that was overly alarming. Now, or alarming at all. I don't want to make it sound like there was anything in there. It was all standard business inside of, photo editing software. But the point that I want to make here is if you are photographing clients' non-disclosure agreements, or if you're photographing intimate sessions like boudoir or something where you don't want your images to be used without your consent in any way, shape, or form, if you process your image in the cloud, Retouch for me is going to take care of it. They're not going to do anything to impact the privacy of your images. So that's the benefit of using a software like this. Now, if you download and purchase each of the plugins and you work local to your machine, then you're not going to run into that issue anyway. It's just going to take care of itself. But if you don't do that, well, know that processing in the cloud is going to be okay. And you'll notice here, let me zoom out. There we go. You'll notice here, you do not have to process in the cloud. And when I uncheck this yes, you're going to see these options down here change. So I uncheck it and you'll notice I have plugins and available for download. Anything that's under this available for download section, that means I don't own it. I don't have access to it. I didn't download it. And I showed you earlier that I only have 4 of them downloaded to my machine. That's Hill, Dodge and Burn, Portrait Volumes, and then Face Make, which that's all that I can run as a solo standalone. All right. Now, the next option here is use pre-rendered previews. So if I click on that, I'm going to get this slider. And again, this is only going to allow me to work with the images that with the plugins that I have available to me. But you'll also notice that Face Make disappears from here. And I think that that's fine. But essentially, if you want to see what the final image is going to look like, you can click this pre-render button, which it's already rendered on this image. So if I turn it off and turn it back on, let me zoom in here on Nikki. Again, her Instagram is down in the description box below if you want to go and check out some of her other work. But if I turn this off and turn it back on, you can see on her cheek here, there was a darker spot, and Retouch for me just very quickly and simply healed this. All right. I'm just toggling off and on so you can see the difference. So this is with all of the retouching off, and this is with all of the retouching on. Now, this all happened in real time. I didn't paint anything. I didn't have to brush anything. I literally just turned on the software, and it's all just check boxes. So it's really easy. Now, for those of you who want a little bit more fidelity and control, you can definitely click this drop down, expand, and you can choose what type of image you have. So in this one, I probably would have selected full length, just because if I zoom out here, I have her whole body in frame, right? But let's say you were just shooting close-ups or maybe half length, you could select that. Now, I find that the AI detection does a really good job at figuring this out, so I don't have to do a whole lot when it comes to that. All right. But let's say you want to look at this a little bit deeper and you want to kind of, really refine this. Well, what I can do is click this gear icon, and it's going to, when Retouch for me opens it up, it's going to launch it in the viewer. All right. And what I can do now is, once it gets done loading the preview, is I can look at this before and after with just what Retouch for me is doing for the heel. So it doesn't look like it actually applied it yet. Well, it did apply it. So the dodge and burn is what actually corrected this area on her cheek, now that I'm looking at it. And this is the beauty of opening up each of these and seeing what it does. So if you think that it gets a little too strong, open up each one of the plugins by hitting that little gear icon, and you can do a before and after. All right, before and after. Now, you don't get the ability to mask in any of this. So if you want a little bit more granular control, like on her neck, it got rid of one of her, what I would identify as a beauty mark. I think that she would also keep it. And this is one of those things where you go look at previous photos, or you just make a judgment call. Does this need to stay? Should this go away? All right. Because retouch for me got rid of it. But what I could do is just pull down on the sensitivity. And I know that it's this little white dot right here that I want to bring back. So I just need to keep looking until that white dot goes away. But then it starts to bring back some of this other detail in the skin that maybe I did want to have retouched out. All right. So we're going to leave that up to 100%, because the final way that I'm going to show you, which is the layer method, you'll be able to paint that back in. And that's the method that I like the most for this workflow. All right. But I want to show you as many options available for using On1 Photo Raw and the Retouch for Me ARMS editor. So we're going to go ahead and hit apply, let that go. And that's just how easy it is to render all of these settings. All right. Now, if you happen to be a cloud-based user, I'm going to be honest with you. I would not use the Retouch for Me ARMS editor if you plan to use the cloud-based process in order to edit your images. The reason for that is every time that you render a preview over here, it's going to use a credit, and you didn't even export the image. All right. So I don't recommend that you use the ARMS version if you're going to use the credit system. Instead, I recommend a different option. So we'll jump to that. But before we do, note that you get access to more plugins. Like, I didn't purchase these plugins, but I have access to them. The white teeth, the eye vessels, clean backdrop, fabric dust, I have access to them, even though I didn't purchase those plugins. All right. So let's go ahead and close down the ARMS, and then we'll jump over to the other program that Retouch for Me allows us to use their plugins. And this is purely cloud-based. And this is Retouch for Me Apex. Now, keep in mind, you cannot use a raw image. I'm going to show you. So if I click Browse, and right here, I have a series of JPEG images. Again, these are photos that I specifically selected for this tutorial. But if I come over to a folder, we'll go here, and then I have a folder of nothing but raw images. I can't select these. And that's the difference between, or one of the differences between using the Apex editor, which I'm in right now, and the ARAM editor. ARAM editor allows you to use raw photos. Apex editor, you can only use rastered images such as a TIFF or a JPEG. All right. Now, my recommendation, if you're going to work this way, use a TIFF file when you export from On1 Photo Raw. So we're just going to go ahead and jump back, gets me back to this folder. And you can see I have a series of JPEGs in here. So that's not what I want. Let's go over to this drive, and we'll come down here. And here is the TIFF file that I exported specifically for this lesson. So we'll go ahead and hit open, and this is going to open that file. Now, I could open a series of files and do batch editing if I wanted to, and that's the beauty of using AI tools. I'm showing this on a specific image just so that way we can keep up with the consistency of what each of these plugins are doing across the program. So let's go ahead and just double click to expand this into the workspace. And as you can see, when I load in my image here, it's a very similar browser experience to the ARAM editor, with the exception that I have my credits first and foremost, because again, this is going to work inside of the cloud, and you get the exact same pop-up for the cloud editing on this window as well. Whenever you hit start retouching, it probably won't show up for me this time, just because I did already process some images into the cloud. But with that being said, you can just hit start retouching, and then you'll see that this credit is going to go from 294 to 293. So we'll hit start retouching, and we'll let that do its thing. Now, based off of your internet speed, it is going to make a difference. The other note that I'll make is, if you run into any errors with a server, you can change the server down here in the settings. And if I click on settings, you can see right now I'm on server 1. So if I get an issue, which I don't foresee getting an issue with this particular server, but if I do, then I can switch to server 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. I think that those are good enough for understanding what's happening, but you can just select a different server. That's all that you really need to know about the settings here. Everything else system wise, that's going to give you your product keys and all that stuff, not as important for what we're doing here today. But just know that if you download this and you start using it, that's where that information is. So we did run into a server issue. So this is perfect. I can change my server to server 2, hit apply, and then I can hit start retouching. Now, because it ran into an issue, you'll notice that it didn't actually charge me one of those credits. So, but it looks like it actually retouched it too, because her skin is clear. So that's interesting. Sometimes you get the error, and it actually did work. So I'm not sure what the deal is with that, but nonetheless, you can see I still have 294 credits. So I guess that worked in my benefit, that it processed the image and didn't charge me a credit. All right. Because this is the same TIFF file that I was showing you earlier in the ARAM workspace. So what's cool about the Apex workspace is that you can actually modify these a little bit differently. All right. You get access to more plugins, and they look grayed out, but if you click on them, you can actually modify them. All right. You can turn it off, turn it on, or turn plugins off and on. You can expand them, and you get a little bit more fidelity. So this is a facelift type of thing, and I guess now is a great time for me to give a disclaimer. I do not encourage body retransformation for the sake of what looks beautiful. All right. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And I think that there's too many ideas of what beauty actually is that kind of puts it into a single, what's the frame that I want to put it in? Puts it into a very narrow genre of this is what beauty looks like. And I think that based off of using tools like this, you got to be careful, because you could definitely change someone's overall look. So whatever edits you make, it should be specific to the individual, but true to the individual. That's just my personal take on it. Use these tools, however you would use them, but just know that that is what I would say. All right. We as photo editors should always be looking to enhance the model or our subject in the frame, but not at the expense of making them look like someone they're not. All right. That's all that I'm going to say about that. With that being said, if you need to do a facelift, you can do that. That's essentially what this is. And if I were to zoom in just a little bit here so it's easier to see on screen, if I just pull up on this facelift, and I'm not sure if it's actually rendering that right now or not. I probably do have to hit start. But as you pull this up, you would see the change in the face. And this just may not be the best image for the facelift overall. But nonetheless, we have hill here, and you can pull down the sensitivity. It's all sliders, right? It's really easy. And the benefit of using this particular program, and I think I am going to just hit start retouching, because I think the reason it's not updating is because it didn't actually give me that render in the cloud. So hopefully this time we get that render in the cloud, because as you move these sliders, you start to get that feedback. But what's cool about it is not only do I get more options available to me than what have downloaded on my computer, but I also get a masking brush and an eraser to remove it from certain areas. So this is where that workflow of you did your entire stylistic shoot or your editing. So you've managed your raw editing and you've applied your style. And now you just want to use this as a finishing touch to your overall image to clean up the skin. This is where you would do that. I would recommend using Apex because you get the masking brush tools and the erasing tools. Let me just zoom in over here so it's easy to see. I'm talking about these tools right here. All right. You get the masking brush, the eraser, and this is just like a invert mask type thing, or whatever. And then of course you get the before and after. All right. So the so what to all of this, and zoom back out. The so what to all of this is if you want to work in the cloud and have more access to plugins without having to purchase individual plugins, the credit system could be the way to go for you, especially if you're doing just a handful of photos here and there. This could be the way to go for you because you get more. Like if you were to purchase each of these individually, it would be substantially less than, or I'm sorry, more. There we go. Now it's actually completed the processing. This is what you want to see. All right. When you get done loading or completing the render in the cloud, and now it's just loading the preview, and you can see it actually took that credit. So it went from 294 to 293. Simple math there. But the point that I'm making here is if you want to work with cloud processing, let's see if I can pull up on the lifting. It's still not giving me that preview. I think we just need to wait for this to finish loading. And this should be going a little bit faster. It definitely went faster, I think, because I'm using so many resources on my computer, from screen recording software to the internet, as well as On1 is running in the background. My computer is just moving a little bit slower. But the point here is when you do use the credit system, you get access to more programs at a lower price point than if you were to purchase each of these individually and download them to your computer. The good thing about purchasing them individually and downloading them to your computer is the fact that, now it's ready to go, is the fact that you can go ahead and render as many files as you want on your computer locally, as many times as you want, and you don't have to worry about credits because you've already paid for the technology. All right. But that comes at a price of paying for each individual plugin. Now, once you have the rendered copy of the image, you can see it says done, which is a clear indication that it's ready. So now if I turn off the facelifting, and I'll zoom in here so it's easier to see. And I think Nikki already has a well sculpted and defined face. So this is not a tool that is necessary for her. Going back to my original statement of not overly manipulating the subject. But if I turn it on, you can see what it does to the face. And it's also modifying some areas back here. Now, what you can do is you can come into this mask if you wanted to, and you could paint stuff away or use the eraser and paint stuff away. I'm not going to worry about that because this little area is insignificant. So whatever it is actually manipulating, not a big deal to me. All right. And then you can choose different types of faces and you can play with the sliders. Again, I'm not going to go super deep into that. This is just to give you an overview of how you can start using this software with On1. All right. But you definitely have to get a good look out of the software. Now, if I turn the before and after on, you can see what's happening here. So that's the facelift. And I guess the heel was already done. And that's my bad. I may have grabbed an image where I had already healed her skin. In which case, that's why the skin looks as good as it does. But I think that you get the point, all right? You can heal the skin, and then you can dodge and burn the skin. So if I turn this off and turn it back on, you can see what that's doing. It's just giving a little bit more cleanliness and softening the shadows in this area. So if I turn this off and then turn it back on, it's just dodging that ever so slightly. And if I feel like it's too strong, I can just pull this back just like that. And now if I turn it off and turn it on, you can see it's not as aggressive, right? But notice I'm getting the ability to reshape each of these tools without using another credit. And that's the benefit of using Apex over ARAM, right? If I were to do this inside of the ARAM editor and I had that cloud selection tool selected or process in the cloud toggled over to yes, every time that I made a change, it would render a new credit, all right? And then you'll just run out of credits really fast. So if you're going to work with the credit system, this is the way to go. And then if you run into that error, come down here to the settings, change your server, and you should be able to find a server that's going to work for you. All right. We're going to go ahead and hit save on this. And when you hit save, so non-destructive edit retouch already exists. Do you want to replace it? I'm going to hit cancel because I don't want to replace it. And so I'm going to hit the save as, which works just like any other program inside of your computer. You're now going to rename the file to something else. So I'm going to label this retouch-1. And then we'll save it into the Retouch for Me demo because that's where I'm saving everything. And I'll just hit save. So now it's going to, render the image. Nothing fancy here. I feel like that's pretty straightforward. So while this happens, I'm going to get some coffee. All right. So I got the notification saying that that has been saved. I can now close this out. And we can jump back into On1 Photo Raw. And I should have inside of this folder, because this is the folder where I was saving all of those images. And the beauty of On1 is it reads your file structure. So as long as you're saving your images in the same folder where you're already working, On1 is going to read that file that you send back. And here it is. So it's down here at the bottom. And so I now have access to it. I'm not going to open it because I'm going to show you how I like to work with this particular workflow. All right. So there's the image that we just sent out of Apex. And did not mean to zoom in there. Let's go back to the grid. And you do that by hitting the letter G on your keyboard for those who may not be familiar. Now, the file that I want to work with is going to be this non-destructive TIFF file, because the other one I think already had a crop to it. Actually, we'll go with the raw file. When I was doing this in practice, I noticed that the raw file had a different crop than the TIFF file. I don't know how that happened, but it looks like maybe that's been corrected. So nonetheless, this is now the third workflow. All right. So we've already gone over the non-destructive editing workflow, where you do your raw edits, you send it out to whichever version of Retouch for Me you want to work with, and then you bring it back into On1, and you continue editing that file by itself. Then we went over the finishing touches workflow, where you go ahead and you apply a preset. So let's say this is the raw image. I want to apply a preset to this now. Maybe we want to add in a cinema preset. So what I'm going to do is just option click to apply one. Go with this one right here. And that's just going to apply this over my my existing effects. And I said option click. I meant to say control click. And my computer is just crawling right now. Come on, computer. You can do it. Let me just right click. Eventually I should get the pop-up with the right click. It's thinking. I got the rainbow wheel. The challenge of my computer. It's just real life sometimes. But now I can do insert preset. So that way it goes over the edits that I already had. And, I would have to stylize this a little bit better. But for what I want to show is, this is the version of the image where I have not applied any of the retouching from Retouch for Me. So I would go ahead and export this as a TIFF with all of my styles applied, and then run the retouching. And then the final image that I get out of Apex or ARAMs or one of the standalone plugins from Retouch for Me, that would be my final image, because I would be using it as a finishing touch. All right. But the method that I recommend, so we're just going to go ahead and undo all of this fun stuff. The most recommended method is that you do your raw editing, you export the TIFF file, you do your retouching in Retouch for Me, and then you reopen your raw file. All right. Because what On1 allows us to do, which makes On1 so unique, is we can stack layers. So very similar to what I would have gotten if I had clicked on layer, filter, and then processed the image through the inline. I kind of just went outside of On1 to do the processing, but now I can bring it back into On1 by hitting this plus icon. And when you hit the plus icon for layers, it brings you to the folder that you were already working in. All right. And so now all I have to do is come down here and I can select this retouch TIFF file, click that, add as layer, and then it's going to add above my original file. And I get the best of both worlds here, where I can start masking in my retouched image. And I'll show you that once it gets done rendering. And hopefully the crop is still correct. So yeah, I ran into, so it's not an issue with the crop. I'm just now noticing that. So the TIFF file, it came in, if I zoom in down here, you can see it's just not aligned. So what I need to do is come over here to my move tool, and I'm going to click on this fill canvas button just to see if that fixes it. And let's go ahead and zoom out, Command and 0. And it looks like that fixed it. So if I turn this layer off and on, you can see I'm not getting much of any movement, and everything looks to be aligned just fine. There's a little bit of movement, but not a whole lot. I think it's good enough to work with. So now what I can do is just turn on this layer, hit my layer mask, and in the area where I was identifying that earlier I was mentioning that I think that she has a beauty mark on her neck. And if I wanted to bring that back artistically, or if the client was like, hey, you really got rid of some stuff that I didn't want to have removed, well, all I have to do is come up here to the mask, take my masking brush, set it to erase, and I'll just resize that a little bit smaller. And what I'm going to do is first erase this whole section just so I can see it. And there it is. And then I can go ahead and hit Shift X or come up here and click Paint. And I can just repaint this area in, leaving that mole, or the beauty mark, I should say, not a mole, in place. And this is using the tool just like you would if you were working in Photoshop, for those of you who are familiar with a layer-based editing technique inside of Photoshop. All right. And it's really that simple. So now hit Command and 0 to zoom out. I now have my layers. The caveat to this is you will be saving this file, or this file will save as a .onphoto file when you hit the blue check mark. And I don't think that there's a problem with that. You just got to be aware of that, because this entire workflow that I'm talking about is going to take up space. A TIFF file is going to be about 300 megabytes of storage on your hard drive, depending on the size of the file. Now, this is a Sony A7R4 file. You can see that up here, and zoom in just a bit. A7R4 file. And those are huge files. Like if you look at this, it's a 6,000 by 9,000 file. That is a massive file to begin with. And then when I exported this as a TIFF, it turned into a 300 megabyte file. And just trying to zoom back out, stay out. There you go. So just keep that in mind. When you work in this particular workflow, you are going to use a lot of storage on your hard drive. So you will need to know where those files are being saved. And then once you get done with the project or with all of your images, go ahead and delete all of the files that you don't need, just to keep safe, to save storage space. Now, be careful that if you plan to come back to this onphoto file later and re-edit, make sure that you keep all of those files intact. Meaning, what I don't want to do, I'm just going to hit the blue check mark, and we'll let that save for a bit, and then I'll just jump over here. So what I mean by this is you don't want to delete your files that are making up that onphoto image. So let's say you run 4 different instances of a plugin, and then you re-render it back inside of On1, and you put 4 different images in your layers. Make sure that the images that you've uploaded into your layers, you keep those somewhere safe on your hard drive, so that way On1 still has those files to reference. Everything else you can delete. But I wouldn't start deleting files until I was done with the project. So let me jump back into the computer now that that's saved as the onphoto file. You can see that over here on the left, just above my head, that I saved this image as an onphoto file. And again, onphoto files are just containers inside of On1 Photo Raw that pulls in all of the resources based off of where they live on your hard drive. They don't have to be in the same folder. It's helpful if they are for your own personal management. But if the resources that I use to build the OnPhoto file were spread across 15 different folders on my hard drive, ON1 would still pull them all in, and it would reference each of those images as long as they exist in that exact same space. All right. That kind of gets outside of the scope of using retouch for me in a workflow, but where it does actually hold merit for what we're discussing today is you want to make sure that the images, like this file right here, is being referenced by this OnPhoto container. So I want to make sure that this file stays in the same area as the OnPhoto file, all right? Or in the same area until I'm done with this OnPhoto file. And then I can get rid of those or move them or whatever I want to do. File management, it's great. Nonetheless, I wouldn't start deleting any of my images until I have completed, if this folder represents a project, right? As you can see, I have a few different shots here of Nikki and some other models that were along on the photo shoot. If this was an entire project that I was working, I would finish this entire project, get my final images and put those into a deliverable folder or a final edits folder or a completed works folder, whatever you want to label that folder. And then I would say, okay, what in here do I no longer need because I have the final images? Like this TIFF non-destructive. This was the very first image that I sent out of ON1, and it didn't have any of the retouching. If I don't need that file anymore, I can go ahead and delete it. And this holds true with any workflow where you're working with an external editor. But in the case of this particular tutorial or this lesson, I no longer need this image, so I can delete it because I would have already exported my final images. And I recommend putting the final images somewhere that is completely separate from your workspace area so you don't accidentally delete that folder. Maybe I've done that once or twice. Just being honest. Like, and that is not good. That's a terrible feeling. So now I don't delete until I deliver to the client and the client has confirmed receipt and we're good to go. I don't delete anything until I deliver, at least for paid work, right? And if it's personal work, then, you know, whatever. I'll just lick my wounds on that later. So, yeah. But that's essentially the workflow, the three options that are available: non-destructive, finishing touches method, and then the layering method. Now, again, I do recommend that you work in a TIFF-based workflow with this at the highest resolution that your computer can support, and everything else. Now, if you do have to work inside a JPEG, you can. Just know that you're going to be limited on retouching the image re-editing the light in the image later down the line. The good news is you can use the layering method if you have already completed your style. You can use the layering method. I would be careful using the non-destructive method. I would probably only use JPEGs with the finishing touch method, which is I've already stylized my image. I've already processed my raw settings and I got the light just the way that I want. So now I just need to make sure that the skin looks really good. It's like a polishing effect to send the image off into the sunset. That method is where I would use the JPEG. In the other two, the non-destructive and the layering method, I would only use TIFF files. That's my recommendation. The good news is if you use JPEGs or the finishing touch method, you likely will save space because JPEGs are considerably smaller, 15 to 20 megabytes, give or take, in respect to a 350 megabyte file for a TIFF. So take that for what it's worth. I think that would be value added. And because you're also working inside of On1 Photo Raw, you can utilize the JPEG XL. So if you really want to save some space, you can use that file format and it'll help out. So that is how I would recommend using Retouch for me inside of On1 Photo Raw, or at least as a workflow tool inside of On1. And in the future, I'm going to do more dedicated videos that talk about Retouch for me and how you can incorporate it inside of your workflows and some best practices that I'm finding as I continue to incorporate the tool in my own workflow with family photos as well as some of my paid work. So if that's something you're interested in and you haven't already, consider subscribing so that way you can get notified when new content comes out that is specific to using Retouch for me or On1 Photo Raw or any of the editing software that I use here on the channel, because On1 is my favorite editor, but it's not the only editor that I use. I use many editors. All right. So I'm going to leave it there, and I don't see any questions in the comment section from the live. So I think we are good to go. But if you're watching this on the replay and you have questions, leave it in the comment section below. And if you want to pick up this tool, then consider using the affiliate link down in the description box, as well as the coupon code FWP20. All right. That'll save you some money when you purchase these programs. And I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about using this workflow inside of On1. Do you like it? Do you have concerns about it? Do you just completely have no idea why you would ever want to do this? Because all of that helps me continue to make content that's value added to the community of users here at On1, or that use On1, I should say. So with that, I want you guys to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.